Good morning, everyone. I'm here from the Knowledge Transfer Network, but really what I want to talk to you about is I3P, the Infrastructure Industry Innovation Partnership. For those of you that don't know anything about it, I thought I'd go through a little bit of history, tell you a little bit about it and where it came about. So I3P is the successor to Crossrail's Innovate 18 program. Crossrail discovered halfway through their program that it was really difficult to drive innovation on a large project, and they looked at different ways of doing it. The CEO, Andrew Waltonstone, worked with academia and other people to look at a whole raft of different ways of driving innovation on a large project. And they came up with a concept called Innovate 18. And Innovate 18 was a sort of groundbreaking tool at the time, and it was a multi-purpose tool. It was a space, it was a portal, it was somewhere where you could share innovation ideas. It was a pot of money to seed fund some of those innovation ideas, and it was also a management structure that sat outside of the organization. There were some 400 or 500 innovations that were shared on the portal, of which about 45 were funded in various different ways, and this just gives you a bit of a background to some of those funded pieces. Back in 2016, Crossrail decided that they had no use for an innovation program at the tail end of the project. In hindsight is a wonderful thing. Perhaps that wasn't the best of ideas. And they wanted to pass on their innovation program. And initially it was going to be passed on to Tideway. But a number of people got together, 7 major clients got together and said, look, this is a really good idea. We want to try and drive this across the industry. And there were 7 clients: Crossrail, Tideway, Hinkley, Network Rail, Highways England, Environment Agency, and Heathrow, who came together and said, no, yeah, we want to do this. And I3P was born. Initially, it was going to be run by Tideway, but suddenly they realised that if it was run by Tideway, it would be seen as the Tideway Innovation Programme. So that the KTN, the Knowledge Transfer Network, came on board as the facilitator. So we just provide the secretariat service for it. I3P has grown into an organisation now. We've got some 11 clients and 19 supply chain members, both tier 1 contractors and designers, and work together to form a whole range of different collaborations. And we'll look at some of those things that we do. Currently is chaired by Mark Thurston, CEO of HS2, and Steve Moore from the Environment Agency. It's a client-led organisation, and we've developed a number of projects in a particular sort of theme. The Shaping the Future of I3P is really around 4 strategic priorities. Health, safety and well-being has been a project that's part of I3P from the very beginning. Why wouldn't you share how you can improve the health and safety and well-being of workers? It's a no-brainer to do it. Zero Carbon World is an enormous project. Part of I3P wants to play its part in this. Everybody's involved in trying to drive zero carbon, and I3P is sort of mapping out how it may take part in that process. Demand side capable client, really looking at how you can work with a capable client that has that ability to take a view on the build cost against the operational cost, and perhaps increase the build costs, but to drive down operational costs, and what else can be done as a capable client. And what we've also heard from Mark from HS2 this morning is about their supply side industrialize. That whole process of industrializing the supply chain, more than just off-site, because site works, groundworks can't be done anywhere else. You've got to be done on site. But how can we learn from the best of industrialized processes to make that a more industrialized operation? So what I'm going to do is really sort of give you a very brief overview of some of the innovation ideas that have been part of Innovate 18 and I3P across those years, to look at really a bit of a journey through digital transformation and what it was like in the very early days, and what I see as some of the future events. So we look at some of the very early points. I went back through the database and looked at some of the very early things, and this is a piece of software which is really just an Excel spreadsheet, which is collecting and collating data about environmental data on the Crossrail project, and that was sort of state of the art back in 2014 when this was put on the portal, looking at collecting that sort of data. There was a lot of work done on the Crossrail about looking at monitoring the operation. So optical monitoring of the segments was a interesting piece of work. A lot of glass optical fiber parts put into the Crossrail program, enabling to monitor the operation and the installation. There was another company called Utterberry, who was a launch out from Cambridge. They did a lot of work in sensors, movement sensors, basically meshing those sensors together to be able to measure huge, very tiny movements in the tunnel as it was built. So there's a whole range of things that are going on now. What are the sort of digital transformations of the current program, and a whole range of those. But I think we just picked out a few. This is a sort of Trimble Sight Vision piece that was used on the A14 project. A lot of augmented reality, looking at what's going to be at that place when you're doing the original surveying. So a huge amount of innovation around that kind of large data piece. But even to some sort of fairly simple pieces around looking at health, safety and well-being. This is a project from Tideway, Move the Right Way, looking at using an app to help people lift and move in the right way to minimize musculoskeletal disorders, and a really interesting way of using data and applications to do that. There's been a couple of interesting I3P sponsored projects. Dig to Share was an interesting project around site investigation data. Has worked through looking at ways that we can share site investigation. Often the data is used once and never used again, and somebody comes along to the site and drills another hole. But Dig to Share is a sort of banking system, giving people the ability to share site investigation data from one client to another. Zones of influence was another piece of work that we did with Crossrail, looking at a large shaft on the Tideway project, rather, a large shaft where you will have to identify the people that were at risk for building movement, and what is that zone of influence. By putting a lot of extra sensors as Crossrail, as Tideway, drove their shafts into the ground, we were able to look at that data model and see what was the true zone of influence, and that was much smaller than was thought about in the original operation. So what are the sort of things, the collaborative projects that are changing the way we work and transforming the way we work? Again, I've just picked out a few interesting projects that we've been involved in I3P, mainly run by small SMEs. N-Plan was a really interesting organisation who got involved in I3P in the very early days. Took a lot of site scheduling data from I3P members, and from that has built an extensive database of project work, so that you can take a current project plan, compare it to an enormous database of previous project plans, and get a good rating about how your project will benefit in that space. Two others following in a similar line. Flow Ledger is a small SME developing an AI software system which will look again at project scheduling, project management, and the way that we can learn from previous tasks and how we develop those project scheduling software to a new level. Nodes and Links, another SME who are doing some work in a very similar space. So those three companies looking at scheduling and using modern data and methods of capturing and working with modern data to enabling enhancing the systems. Contilio is another interesting SME sponsored by Innovate UK. They won 2 Innovate UK grants to look at interesting system that will actually measure the build progress of projects using geospatial, using LiDAR and lots of other data to look at a project and see what's complete, and lots of interest in developing models that work in financial systems with them so that people can get paid on the basis of work that they're doing. Really sort of future edge systems that are taking us to a new level of digital transformation. And I3P has played a really interesting part in facilitating those operations. So what's next? What are the sort of things that we might look at next? Digital twin of the natural environment is a really interesting project that is at very early stages, but working with a whole lot of collaborators from I3P and beyond to look at how we can take data out of the natural environment and use that as a driver for a digital twin. All sorts of data sets exist. How can we best bring those together to build a world that is connected with a vast array of data that can be used for both in the construction and the operation of projects, and to understand the impact on our environment that's going on. So a huge amount that's going on in that space, and collaboration has been key to how that works. The idea of having these number of clients and supply chain members working together has been really critical to the success of I3P. I3P is going through an interesting phase change now, where there's a lot more involvement from SMEs. The membership model is going to expand. SMEs from across the supply chain industry will be encouraged to join, as will academia, and so we're hoping to expand the network of I3P in the coming months and years. And that's me finished on that very brief introduction. Thank you very much.